The last procedure we're talking about is our holding zones and holding schools procedure. And again, this one has to basically deal with all growth issues for the board. And although we are in a decline and we have empty pupil places, we also have areas of the board that has extreme pressure for accommodation because of just rapid growth in the areas. We have that not only in north of Fanshawe Park Road, we're about to have it in southwest London as well. We also have it in St. Thomas, Woodstock, and various other locations. So basically the establishment of a holding zone or holding schools where areas of pending residential development or enrollment pressure has the potential to exceed the program and operation capacity of the designated school. A holding school is an interim alternative pupil accommodation arrangement until such time as the long-term pupil accommodation can be found. So what we do is we take an area of developing and we do it before any students exist there from the residential development, and we move them to a holding school so we don't disrupt their educational program. And we place them in a holding school until such times that the permanent accommodation can be found, a new school built, so on and so forth. And again, this procedure does not apply to Con Adult or Con Ed. The long-term accommodation solutions, again, they're placed in a holding school to permanent accommodations in existing schools. It may be that they're in a holding zone, but over time there's rapid decline that we can actually move that subdivision or that area back into the school that they're supposed to be in because room opens up, that we construct a new school or that an additional renovation on that existing designated school is completed, and then they can accommodate the students. When TVSB administration identifies an area of pending enrollment pressure, it may consider it advisable to establish one or more holding zones and a holding school for that area of development. So it may not only be one holding zone, we may split it up and go to two different schools. So it doesn't always mean that one subdivision, the whole subdivision would go to one area. It may be a number of different holding schools depending on the capacity we have. And we have to prepare a report to the trustees containing recommendations for establishing this holding zone and holding school, along with the enrollment projections and growth projections for the area. So a holding zone report will address the following: the effect on the proposed interim accommodations will have on the capacity of the holding school. So we can't just overpopulate another school. We have to talk about what that school that's going to be receiving those students, what that's going to do to that school. The proposed holding schools will have suitable program space. We want to make sure they have enough FDK rooms, gymnasium suitable, library, so on and so forth. That is proper outdoor recreation areas, that the site's big enough to handle more kids, parking, student drop-off, bus loading, all has to be reviewed to make sure we're not causing a situation at the holding school that's not appropriate. That all legislative and operational requirements will continue to be met, enough washroom capacity, so on and so forth at the school, and that the long-term pupil accommodation planning as it relates to the holding zone. What is the plan for that school? When would we be able to move them back potentially to the new school, or what is the long-term plan for those students holding in a holding school? The trustees, again, have the authority to approve, modify, or make different recommendations with respect to our report. When the trustees approve the amend the holding zones, the affected principals will be notified, the chairs of the school councils will be notified, as well as the home and school. The parents and guardians of any schools whose primary residence is in the holding zone, if they have developed, will be notified. And the owner of any yet developed property will also be identified or be notified that there's property has now been placed in a holding school. And the municipality in which that holding zone is located will also be notified that this has happened, so that they are aware of it as they go through their planning processes. We have created this paragraph that's to go into all subdivision agreements that we ask the municipalities to place in subdivision agreement, basically saying that to the developers, so that any future homeowner building will know that potentially there's their lot or their building, their house, maybe the students may be placed in a holding school. There's no guarantee when we will be able to accommodate them in a neighborhood school. Just make sure that the public is aware of that going in. If they are purchasing a lot, planning that their students would be attending a school that has yet been developed. So we think that's important information for any future sales of the area. We do have a grandparenting section in this procedure. Again, if it's a residential development and it's a 100-acre farm and there's 2 or 3 farmhouses on it, those students that are there before the residential development starts would be able to be grandfathered. Even though their area would be taken out, we'd be allowing them to be grandfathered. to the school, grandparented to the school that they are now attending. So we are adversely affecting students because there's residential growth coming around them, but they already exist. And again, transportation would be provided depending on the trustee's decision of that. Again, this is a very quick procedure just to clean up our growth situations, ensuring that we have a procedure in place to deal with growth. We were a little weak on this one prior to it, but it allows us to temporarily transplant growth until we're able to properly accommodate without flooding or creating huge accommodation issues at schools that we can't deal with, and we can't get anything built or changed from capital funding or capital dollars in the amount of time that the rapid amount of kids that are coming out of some of the subdivisions that we can't keep up with. Is there any questions on that procedure? Yes.
Are there any exceptions to the holding zone and grandparenting? And I use the term loosely for brand new students to Kent Valley in terms of approval to go to their designated school versus holding zone.
The whole idea behind our holding zone, what we do is we actually create these before the houses are built. So they're not there. So the students haven't started to attend. So if they are in an existing residential, if there's a house, and I use the example, a 100-acre farm has a farmhouse on it, has 3 kids attending a school. They would be grandfathered to their school. They're not new residential students, so we would say, we're not going to adversely affect you. You can continue to be grandfathered, or you can go to the new school, whichever way, it's your choice. But any new students coming in those houses that should be built would be placed in another school, at holding zone school. So we're there before the students actually arrive. So that would be the grandfather situation on the holding zones or holding schools. So we're really in an attempt, 2 or 3 years, as soon as the registered plans come through and we can see the growth, they're starting to build roads. Before any foundations are in the ground, we want to get to the trustees and say, we want to take this phase 1 and phase 2, there's 400 lots, potentially 185 kids coming into that. We want them to hold at this school until such times the proper accommodation can be had. So we're trying to be in front of it and not disrupting their educational program. So it would be very unlikely that any student would be existing student. If they're already there, we'd be dealing with them as a grandfathering situation.
So there's no exemption, no leeway for principals and either supposed to have anything?
Not the way it's, there's always the out of area exemption, which is a different reason that they can do it. And that's done more on the social or academic program for the students. This procedure is basically deal with growth and the rapid. There's always the opportunity to get the out of area exemption to allow a student to go to a different school, but it's handled in a different area of the board, not under this procedure at all. Yeah, again, this is really for us to try to get ahead of growth and not have a situation at school that's complicating an accommodation issue that's unmanageable because they just keep building houses and can't control it. And we can't get schools built. The process of getting schools built are a little longer than how quickly you can put subdivisions up. Any other questions? I want to just note on this one that this is a high-level presentation. If you're now that you went through it, hopefully you have a better understanding when you read the procedures. I filled in some of the gaps or some of the understandings of why this stuff was created the way it was. But we do suggest that you read it if you're going to put input to ensure that you totally understand what the procedures are and that you go through that process if you want to give public input. And again, through our board processes, the policy and procedures are out for 90 days. I believe they went up about a week or a week and a half ago. You have till February the 8th to supply written input to me, since I'm responsible for the procedures, and now we'll go through with that process. I'll correlate all that and ensure that the trustees have your public input. If you have questions on the procedure, again, if you want to email me, I'd be pleased to try to answer your questions before you give public input or anything that wasn't clear tonight, or when you read the procedure, something that you may see that's lacking or need a better understanding of it. I do want to thank you for coming out, and I do apologize for the amount of information and a lot of talking, a lot of words had to be discussed, but I do appreciate the time you've taken on your schedule to come and understand the process, the policies and procedures that I think are important to us, and I wish everybody a good night. Thank you.